Another defensive letdown cost the Falcons their chance at a winning season.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Are going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. Terms and conditions apply. So if you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, a.k.a. Mr. Drew, a.k.a. Sirius Black, a.k.a. the Jolly Green Giant, a.k.a. the iron that sharpens the iron, a.k.a. Mr. a.k.a. And I've been covering the Atlanta Falcons for almost 2 decades, formerly at FalcFans.com. RIP, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. And I thank each and every one of you that go strong with me as everydayers, especially when the Falcons disappoint you in the ways that they disappoint us constantly year after year. But you guys are with me day after day, and I appreciate you, and I appreciate that. And if you want to continue to go strong with me day after day, year after year, make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, of course, as you well know, the Falcons lost their Week 18 finale to the Carolina Panthers, 44-38 in overtime. No playoffs for the Falcons. They could not take care of business, obviously, with the Bucs taking care of business against the New Orleans Saints. They wouldn't have made the playoffs anyway, but, you know, the hope was, for me, again, going into Sunday, was not necessarily making the playoffs, although I dared. There was a point in the second quarter where I dared to dream, guys, and in the third quarter where I was like, oh, this could actually happen. Unfortunately, I promised myself I wouldn't get my hopes up, and I did wind up getting my hopes up. CBS did not do me any favors by giving me an update every single time either the Bucs or Saints scored, and it just did not help with my stress. But the Falcons, of course, did not help with my stress either by playing the way that they did, especially on the defensive side of the ball, giving up over 400 yards to Carolina. Falcons scored over, produced over 500 yards on offense. Right, second, 537, I think it was, which is the second highest of their season, behind that, Kirktober kickoff in Week 5 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This was, I think, the Panthers' second best performance on offense this season, after the 437 yards they had against the Raiders in Week 3, and that was, I think, Andy Dalton's first start of the season. And this was also the Panthers' second worst game in terms of yards given up to this Falcons team, after the 551 yards they gave up to the Bucs last week. So, basically the story of this game, if I'm sure Julian Council of Locked On Panthers talking about it, like, Bryce Young looks like he's back, baby. He's the number one pick. He looked like the guy that was deserving of being the number one pick, because he was balling out in this game. The Falcons really had no answers for what he was doing, and didn't really seem like they were that interested in trying to keep Bryce Young contained. And we'll see what the film says, but overall, sort of my general takeaway, we're not going to go into too much detail about the Falcons defense, guys, because it's like, they stink. That's it. This is the big headline. They stink. They look like the same defense that they were pre-bye that was struggling. There was, soft coverages. There was really no pressure in this game. Young was making plays with his legs. All the things that we have complained about with this Falcons defense, they couldn't stop the run. All the things that we complained about throughout the season showed up again this Sunday. And so all the progress that they seemed to show after the bye week just completely went out the window in this game. And so if you went into Sunday thinking that the biggest priority for this team this offseason wasn't going to be upgrading and revamping their defense, then you're thinking a little bit different coming out of Sunday. That was certainly confirmed with the performance there. And so, again, it was the same old with them. Not much more I can say about it. They need help at all three levels: up front, linebacker, and in the secondary. And of course, they will spend a lot of resources this offseason, probably, hopefully, the bulk of their resources addressing those issues. So the overarching narrative for the Falcons heading into this offseason, again, last offseason, it was, they're a quarterback away. We didn't quite see that come to fruition, as a certain humble podcast host told you in early January, that narrative was a little misleading. And so we'll see, as the narratives develop over the next 8+ months of the offseason, but basically, that narrative is going to be, hey man, this offense has loads of potential. It's got super, super upside, and you saw that on this Sunday. And then they just got to shore up the defense, and everything's going to be fine for the Atlanta Falcons. And again, we'll see how that unfolds, and we'll break that down over the next 8 months on this very illustrious podcast. But, the question, of course, is going to be whether the regime, buys into that and what they do. And, again, I think there are going to be expectations due to the disappointment of this season that there should be and will be major changes to this current regime. We'll have to sort of see. We'll talk more about that later on the podcast, but I'll just spoiler alert. I'm a little skeptical that we will see any sort of wholesale changes to the coaching or major changes to the coaching staff, major changes to the front office, but we'll just sort of have to see, if Arthur Blank decides that, he wants heads to roll, then heads will roll, because ultimately it is his choice when it comes to that. But if we're talking about, in addition to the defense, the difference in this game was a turnover and a missed field goal. That this was a close one-score ball game that proved to be the difference. FanDuel had the Falcons favored by 7.5 points going into this game, and I was like, hammered the Panthers on covering that spread. And so, the turnover came on a third quarter interception for Michael Penix to Raven McLeod. He bobbled that pass. It's been a theme these last couple of weeks of receivers dropping some passes. That was an issue early in this game. It was like at least 3 notable drops in the first half, and then a bobbled pass or 2, and one of those led to an interception, and that led to a Panthers touchdown. And then if you don't turn the ball over in that situation, if Riley Patterson makes his 52-yard field goal midway, on the next series, midway through the third quarter, Falcons probably win this game, and we're sitting here 9-8, feeling great about. Great, I use air quotes, great, great about whatever you feel great about. Feeling great about Michael Penix is probably what you feel great about. And you sit there and say, even though the season was so disappointing, that silver lining is look how great Michael Penix and that offense looked. And that's why we're going to get into that now as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Guys, let's talk about some positive things. So there's plenty of things to get excited about with this Falcons offense, and we'll do that as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So growing your small business in 2025 is going to come down to how well you're going to hire. And let's face it, better hires start with smarter insights, and that's where LinkedIn comes in. LinkedIn's going to help you identify the right candidates, giving you the confidence to make the best decisions for your business. It's a game changer when it comes to hiring the right fit. LinkedIn will connect you with the best candidates using data that you won't find anywhere else, from unique skills and interests to the connections that you share. LinkedIn helps you find the right person for the job. In fact, 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn has helped them find high quality candidates. Having access to insights and skills and interests that your candidates have, is going to help you feel confident when you pull the trigger on those hires. So hire smarter this year and find your next great hire on LinkedIn by posting your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. And Rocket Money is a personal finance app that's going to help you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and help lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's the subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit in this new year of 2025. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in cancel subscriptions and saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Those canceling of subscriptions is a big selling point with Rocket Money. It's one of the things I enjoy about Rocket Money, because you can quickly find out how much money you're actually wasting when those $5 and $8 here and $7.99 and all that other stuff adds up each and every month. So Locked On has been very good to me, paying me quite a bit of money. And in addition to canceling my unwanted subscriptions, Rocket Money is helping me be smarter with my money so I don't be as frivolous with my money, so I can grow the money that Locked On is giving me these past couple of years. So cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. So we got an explosive day for the Falcons offense, and that to me was a big question when we found out this morning that Darnell Mooney, or I guess technically we found out last night that it was likely that Darnell Mooney was going to suit up today with the shoulder injury, but it was confirmed when the inactive list came out this morning on Sunday that he would be inactive with that shoulder injury that sprung up in the middle of the week. And I wondered, okay, can the Falcons offense be as explosive as they might need to be? Like, again, the hope is that with Carolina's run defense being as atrociously bad as it is, they won't necessarily need the explosive plays because they'll be able to move the ball pretty effectively on the ground. They were able to do so with 227 rushing yards in this game, but they were also very explosive through the air with 8 20-plus yard plays in this game, 7 through the air, 1 on the ground, 2 Drake London touchdowns on like 20 and 21 yards in this game. And so Drake London had a great day, finishing with 10 catches on 18 targets, 187 yards and 2 touchdowns. Michael Penix finished with 21 of 38 on attempts, 312 yards, 2 touchdowns, and an interception. Bijan, I can't remember how many yards he had, but he had a bunch, like close to 160 or something like that, somewhere around there. So great day for the Falcons offense. I wasn't initially happy with kind of the game plan because it felt like early in the game it was a little too unbalanced, if you ask me, right? Like I was keeping a track on it. It was like they kept, anytime they ran the ball on first down, they were succeeding. Anytime they threw the ball on first down, not so much. And it was like, why is Zach Robinson overthinking this? Just run the stinking football, right? But, I think I tracked it. Their first half success rate running the football on first downs, just on first downs, guys, was 89%. Their success rate throwing the ball on first downs was 40%. That carried over in the second half, but it felt like Zach Robinson eventually figured out and it's like, okay, we're just going to commit more to running the football. It's like 78% success rate on those first down runs in the second half, 43% on the passing plays. And again, it's to me this identity for this football team in the near future as Michael Penix continues to grow and develop, and he showed a lot of growth and develop in today's game, but it's still going to be a run first team. And that's why you're going to hear me spend so much time and attention talking about revamping the run scheme and revamping the offensive line, and to see if we can get more out of this rushing team so that, Michael Penix can have the capacity to grow and develop behind a run first team. So the run game was very good, the run game was very good today. The run game has been good throughout the season. And in order to help set Michael Penix and the rest of this offense up for success, that run game is going to need to be, in my opinion, great next season. But we'll get there when we get there. So overall, again, not a whole lot of deep, in-depth analysis, guys. I'm ready to turn the page on the season. But Penix played great. Bijan played great. Drake London played great. Tyler Algier played great. They all sort of stood out. I'll be curious when we go back and watch the All-22 film from this game, who sort of stepped up in terms of the blocking. It did seem like a lot of their runs were running to the right side. We know where Chris Lindstrom, Caleb McGarry were. McGarry had some issues against Jadeveon Clowney in this game. So that's going to be something worth keeping an eye on. But also, in addition to all the things that they did offensively, I will be focusing a lot on sort of their play action concepts, because that has been kind of a weakness, in my opinion, of Zach Robinson throughout the season. And I think in order for this offense to reach its full potential next season, they're going to have to be a much more effective and explosive offense when they can dial up those play action concepts in addition to all the run stuff that hopefully they'll be able to achieve at a high level and a great level next season. But that strike that Penix threw to Drake London on like the 39-yard pass, I think was an over route from Drake London at the end of the third quarter. That was beautiful. And so like those are the types of things of like I want to see more of that in 2025. So if we can get more of that. So I'll be very curious to see what the film says on that. But we got to talk about the Penix pulse meter, which is still a work in progress. It is our sort of mid-season or late season pivot from the Kirk Cousins chaos meter. And so again, we'll stick with what I've done the last couple of weeks, which is the pulse meter. We'll have to maybe potentially revamp this in the offseason. I know some of you guys are probably like, get rid of it and whatnot. So we'll workshop it, guys. We'll workshop it. We'll have a better idea of what we're going to do by the time we get to September of 2025. But for those of you not familiar with the Penix pulse meter, there's 5 levels to it, right? Based off what his pulse is and that determining how well he played. The level 1 is the lowest level. That means the pulse is barely there. Level 2 is a steady pulse. That's typically, typical game manager type of stuff. Level 3 is, that adrenaline shot when you take that EpiPen and that thing is firing, but you can lift school buses off of small children, that type of thing. Level 4 is the pulse has gotten too far ahead and now you're in cardiac arrest and you need to go to the hospital. And level 5 is your DOA. The pulse is no longer there. You're dead. And so to me, this was a level 3 game for Michael Penix. It didn't start that way, but it did feel like it was not a perfect day for Michael Penix, as you would expect at this point in time. But it did feel like once he scrambled for that touchdown midway through the second quarter and dove for the pylon, made a great play there. It just felt like after that point, he was kind of locked in. And, any complaints I would have were just like nitpicking, like, oh, he was a little high on that throw. He was a little low on that throw or whatever. But he seemed pretty locked in after that. And so once the literal adrenaline got going with that scramble right there, shades of Michael Vick I joke, but looking good on that scramble. That seemed to be the kind of turning point for Michael Penix, and he was pretty locked in from that point in time. But as much as we're going to praise the offense, we're not going to get too far ahead of ourselves, guys. We do have to remember this was against the Carolina Panthers, who are the worst defense in the NFL. Like, again, this is the high water mark of what this offense has the potential to be, but we will factor in that this was against the worst defense in the NFL. And again, check out Julian Council on Locked On Panthers, where this defense ultimately stacks up in the history of that team. But as we discussed on the crossover, it was headed for a historically bad performance in terms of the worst Panthers defense in team history. So a historically bad defense is basically what I'm getting at. So we'll see if the offense can achieve this. But again, it's at least exciting to sort of see them finish the offense, that is, not the team. The offense finish strong on a very positive note. And so next year's schedule's seemingly going to set up for a much tougher slate of defenses that the Falcons are going to have to face, which is going to, we'll get into sort of what the schedule looks like as, the days and weeks unfold here on Locked On Falcons. I know most of you guys don't pay attention to the schedule until May when it officially comes out, but we will look at some of the opponents that the Falcons will have this upcoming season to sort of set realistic expectations for what this, next 2025 season is going to look like. But that is not where we're going to, talk about today. Instead, we're going to talk about, what's next for this football team. What are some of the coaching changes or front office changes that need to be made, whether Jimmy Lake should be on the hot seat, whether Terry Fontenot should be on the hot seat, and we'll get into all of that, guys, as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So from the big upsets to the game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. It's not just the NFL playoffs, it's the college football playoffs. It's the NBA, it's the NHL. And right now, new customers over at FanDuel can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. FanDuel app is going to give you everything you need for the live bets, the same game parlays, and so much more. And, with the Falcons not in the playoffs, maybe you're checked out of that, but check into the college football playoffs, guys. I had a bet on FanDuel of Georgia beating Oregon in the national championship. That obviously went up in smoke this past week, but now it's time for me to jump on the Ohio State or Notre Dame bandwagons. Or if you're, still a believer in SEC superiority, then, Steve Sarkisian and those Texas Longhorns may got you covered. And in addition to the college football players, you can look ahead to the college football season in 2025. How well do you think Bill Belichick's going to do in new UNC, right? FanDuel, you can bet the over-under with 7.5 wins for the North Carolina Tar Heels in 2025. And in addition to all that, you can bet the NFL playoffs, NBA, NHL, all that's available at FanDuel.com. So head on over there to join today. Get started with $200 in bonus bets. That's at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So tomorrow is the so-called Black Monday, where we will see potentially many heads rolling as far as NFL head coaches and general managers go. I know there's a lot of Falcon fans that think Raheem Morris or Terry Fontenot should be part of that. I don't think we will see that. I'm pretty confident, 99.9% confident. You can never say anything with the Atlanta Falcons. I've learned that lesson many times, right? I'm pretty confident they're not going to take a quarterback at 8. I'm pretty confident that they're not going to, get rid of Matt Ryan so that they can go after Deshaun Watson. I mean, 99%, and so 100% chance of those things happening. And then, of course, the Falcons. So that's why I can't sit here and say with 100% confidence anything involving the Atlanta Falcons. As they say, life finds a way, and the Atlanta Falcons completely underwhelming you finds a way sometimes. But, the Penix pick doesn't look so bad right now as we sit here today. But, I don't think Raheem's going to get fired. I doubt Terry Fontenot gets fired. I'm not going to sit here and say 99% chance that he sticks around, but I'm 99.9% sure Zach Robinson is not going to get fired. Now, maybe he gets a head coaching job with how this season finished with Michael Penix. We'll see. Again, the question is going to be how many coaching jobs are going to be available. We know there are 3 right now. I'm sure as we're speaking right now, there are probably some reports on Twitter and elsewhere that other coaches' heads have just rolled in the last hour or two since the regular season ended, and we'll see more over the next 24 hours and as well as the next several days and weeks in that regard. So the chances of Zach Robinson sticking around in Atlanta as the OC, go down with more firings, right? And I've seen various reports where people are thinking there's up to 8 firings, head coaching firings at this point in time. I feel confident saying that we'll get, in addition to the 3 now, we'll get at least 2 or 3 more openings, but getting 5 more opens, we'll have to sort of see on that. So, there's always going to be some coaching changes after the first year of a head coach. You're going to prune some staff members. You're going to have some guys depart, right? We've already had an offensive assistant head on over to the college ranks and whatnot. There'll be other teams that fire their coaches, and maybe you'll add some coaches there. I would love to see the Falcons add some coaches on the defensive side, people that are maybe less familiar with the sort of Brandon Staley, Vic Fangio defensive system that's a little too passive for our tastes, and can bring a little bit more of an aggressive mindset to that side of the ball to just help Jimmy Lake out a little bit more, and being like, just let's bring a slightly different, more aggressive philosophy into the building so that we won't have situations like we saw this past Sunday, as well as, giving the team some alternative options should, we see more defensive performances like this in the 2025 season. And we're talking about removing people from their current jobs and sort of that sort of thing. So I would love to see that. But, talking about Terry Fontenot, I've been thinking about this for a couple of weeks now. I know there's been a big push among the fan base to get rid of Terry Fontenot. I'm not in that camp. I feel like Terry has not done a great job. I don't think he's done a particularly poor job. I think he's been okay. And so to me, this offseason needs to be his Elvis Dumervil offseason after basically a Courtney Upshaw offseason. And if you're not familiar with that comment and what I mean by that, it stems from something that you've heard me talk about on the podcast if you're an everydayer for a number of years, talking about what makes the Baltimore Ravens so successful under former GM Ozzie Newsome, right? And Terry Fontenot mentioned Ozzie Newsome as a role model when he first got hired here in Atlanta, now 4 years ago. And one of the things that to me stood out about Ozzie Newsome and why he was a good GM was not necessarily because the Ravens were just great at drafting players. They were good at drafting players. They had a very high hit rate in the first round, and generally because they figured out that like the key to good drafting is having multiple swings of the bat, multiple picks, and accumulating a bunch of mid and day 3 picks that they tended to hit more because they had more swings of the bat, not necessarily because they had a particularly elite batting average or anything like that. So that was one of the things that the Ravens figured out. But to me, the other thing that I thought the Ravens did really good is that they didn't necessarily double down on things, right? They wouldn't use a high premium pick and then sort of fall into the sunk cost fallacy. And to me, that's embodied by the Courtney Upshaw versus Elvis Dumervil. And that what happened is at the beginning of 2012, their second round pick, their top pick in that draft selection, they used it on Courtney Upshaw, former Falcon, former Alabama player, to sort of be that sort of wingman to Terrell Suggs as their primary pass rusher. And Upshaw, as I'm sure many of you could guess, did not quite live up to those expectations in year one. And rather than doing the thing that Thomas Dimitroff, regularly did throughout his time in Atlanta, and basically like, we're going to develop Courtney Upshaw, we're going to double down, as you can see with like guys like Vic Beasley and others throughout Dimitroff's tenure in Atlanta. The Ravens went out the very next offseason and were basically able, like, okay, Courtney Upshaw's not the answer, so let's go out and get the answer. And that was Elvis Dumervil, who was, a former All-Pro, led the NFL in sacks a couple of years earlier than that. And you watched Elvis Dumervil and Terrell Suggs be that sort of wrecking crew of a pass rush, which is, sorry for going on this tangent, but when we hired Dean Pease, Dean Pease was the DC of those defenses. And when people were like, oh, Dean Pease is going to be able to just scheme up pressure and all this stuff. And it's like, did y'all actually watch it and play in Baltimore? Like, that was T-Sizzle and Dumervil that was creating all that pass rush. You need guys, you need horses, right? So to speak. So I say all that basically to say, like, to me, I'm willing to forgive Terry Fontenot for the missteps so far, and basically chalk it up to, okay, you drafted Courtney Upshaw, but now you got to pivot, understanding that, okay, Courtney Upshaw is not going to be the guy, and now you got to go out there and get that Elvis Dumervil. And so to me, this offseason represents a great opportunity for Terry to channel his inner Ozzie Newsome as his role model and mentor, or whatever you want to call it, and go out there and do, and pull an Elvis Dumervil and really solve some of these teams' issues, right? With a handful of premium draft picks, you're expecting, as I mentioned before, the expectation is that those will be invested heavily on defense. Hopefully that best player available mindset that has, been the Falcons mindset these last couple of years, gets pushed to the wayside because, they have needs, they have holes that they need to fill, and sort of just like, oh, we'll just take the 3 or 4 best players. It's like, no, you got to go out there and be surgical with how you attack some of these holes on this team. And so I'm willing to give Terry Fontenot that opportunity. I know many of you guys are not in that sort of mindset. You're ready to run him out of town. But another reason why, like, I'm not necessarily willing to do that, because the problem is, because the Falcons have limited cap space, because the Falcons have limited draft picks, right? If you hire a new GM, we're going to be having the same conversation we had with Terry Fontenot 4 years ago, which is, he's hamstrung by, the poor job that Thomas Dimitroff did. And we're going to be sitting here saying for, GM number 2 here, it's like, oh, he's going to be hamstrung by the poor job that Terry Fontenot did. But we'll have to sort of see. Obviously, Arthur Blank is the guy that's, signing the checks and making those decisions. So we'll see if there are, changes to the front office, changes to the coaching staff with Raheem Morris and whatnot. So that is going to be something that we will potentially explore later this week. But again, I'm not expecting that I'm going to have to wake up in the wee hours at 12:08 a.m. To the news that Arthur Smith has been fired like last year, or something major like that with this coaching staff. I think the Falcons need to continue to try to build their success, and hopefully they will have more success than they had this year. This year, I don't think was the disaster that I think a lot of people think it was, but it certainly was disappointing, especially given the start that they had this year and it all seeming to fall apart. But, as a longtime Falcon fan, this has happened so many times. It's like, all right, yeah, the same old with the Atlanta Falcons. I remember when they started 5-0 and finished 8-8. I remember, other seasons when they, under Michael Vick, when they started 5-3 or 6-2 and finished, 7-9 or 8-8 or whatever. So this is nothing new if you're a longtime Falcon fan, like I am myself. So we'll see if they can build off of this. Typically, they didn't build off of this, except for the one time they did in 2016. So, we'll see what's what for this Falcons team moving forward. So, guys, I really do appreciate you guys for hanging out all season, listening to me gripe about the Atlanta Falcons. And I will, try my best to reciprocate by listening to you guys gripe about the Atlanta Falcons, or, whatever you feel like doing all off season long. So we'll be here 5 days a week, until the end of eternity. So we don't take days off in the off season. I try to, and then I'm like, I gotta go talk about the Falcons because they had the audacity to do something on my day off. So we will be here all off season long, 5 days a week, as your first listen to Locked On Falcons. So continue to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and you can check us out then. We'll be back with more insights into this game later this week when we get access to the All 22 review. We'll potentially tomorrow be reacting to either no news or some news on Black Monday. So that's all in store for you here on Locked On Falcons. And if you want to get the lowdown on what's going on elsewhere in the NFL this weekend or in the coming days, as many organizations or, making changes and all that stuff, Locked On NFL is going to have you cover 2 shows daily. That's how much, information that you guys are going to be due in these coming days, that you get 2 shows with Tyler Rowland and Tony Wiggins giving you the lowdown on all the other NFL teams. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.